Right, so which camera is better for video? The Canon EOS R6 or the Panasonic Lumix S5? In this video I'm going to do some tests to find out which one I prefer, and whichever one wins I'm going to buy a second, and whichever one loses I'm going to sell. I know it sounds quite dramatic. Now, if you followed this channel for a while, you'll probably already know that I've been a huge fan of the EOS R6 for a while now. Absolutely love this camera, it's amazing. But since Panasonic sent me my very own S5 to try, I've really enjoyed using it, and I have realised how good this thing is. It's been an absolute joy to work with, and it's not let me down. It's incredible. And let me know in the comments which one you think I'll keep and which one you think I'll sell. So just to give this video some context, I mainly do video stuff. I'm not a photographer by any stretch, as you're probably aware from my thumbnails. So I don't do any professional photography. Bear that in mind while you're watching this. It's going to be a video-centric comparison. Right, let's jump in. First of all, you know the issues with the Canon line and the overheating. It's only ever overheated with me once, and that was during a 4K time lapse, and it just switched off. So I've never done that again since. It wasn't great, and from then on it's made me feel a little bit uneasy, and I've done some jobs where it's given me the overheating warning, and it's just not a nice feeling. It makes you very anxious, and it puts you on edge while you're trying to get a job done. So with the S5, not having to worry about that is incredible. And what I've been doing when I'm filming these YouTube videos, for example, I've been plugging in the mains straight to the camera, and it runs for as long as you like. And I record using the Ninja 5, so it'll record for however long, as long as I've got enough space on my SSD card. And I've done a test and it filled up the SSD card, no overheating, no worries whatsoever. So it just feels so much better. I don't have to worry about anything. It's great. Dynamic range, I mean, the Canon is great. It's just such a nice image. I've always liked Canon. Really easy to color grade because C-Log is great to work with. You barely have to do much. But once you get your picture profiles and your presets set up anyway, regardless of what camera you're on, it doesn't matter anyway. But using Vlog, it's just so much more dynamic range. It's a more flat image to work with. You can just stretch the image wherever you like, and the colors, and it just looks amazing. And the biggest point on this is Canon seem to have this sort of contrast curve and saturation built in already, which looks great, don't get me wrong, but you can't get it to look as clean and clear as the Lumix, for example. Whereas on the Lumix, you can get it to look like the Canon by adding contrast curve and playing around with the saturation and the exposure. So that is a point to the Lumix. I love the Vlog profile, it's great. You can see in these examples in the sky, the dynamic range of the S5 is just so much better than on the Canon. You've got a lot more wiggle room when it comes to blown out highlights and stuff like that. You know you're going to be safe with this outside. This has always been a problem with the Canons. The way you set the white balance is just ridiculous. You have to take a picture first, so you have to switch over to picture mode, then the camera will analyze that picture, then you go back into video mode and set it there. It's just strange. Whereas on this, you just hold your white balance card up, press set, and that is it. You've set your white balance, perfect white balance, and it's just much easier. It definitely shows that this is a more video-centric camera than the R6. I use external monitors quite a lot, but I also like to have a look at what's going on the back of the camera monitor. So it's nice to have a visual of both, and also you want to sometimes be able to control what's going on your touchscreen of your camera. On the Canon R6, you can't do that. If you want to have the display on the external monitor as well as the camera monitor, you can only record externally. Basically, you can't get a clean feed because when you're taking a feed out to the monitor, it displays all your settings around the edge, and sometimes you want just a clean feed. You want to just see what the camera is seeing without all the mess around the edge. Again, on the S5, you can have the option to take away the display features whilst you're externally monitoring, or you can have them displayed as well, so you can capture and record your settings of your camera on your monitor screen, or you can have it clear. You can have it displayed on the back of your camera monitor and still use the touch screen at the same time as recording. So another point to the S5. I'm sure that's something that Canon could fix easily, we've just not seen it yet. On the Canon, we've got custom 1, 2 and 3, but that only works for video mode. So if you want to set up your own custom modes and quickly sift through, you can't do that with video. Now, I knew that when I bought this camera, and to be honest, it's not a massive turn off for me. I don't mind that at all, because I like to check my settings and make sure that I've got everything in place when I switch the camera on anyway, so it doesn't bother me. But if you did want that feature, it actually comes as standard on the Lumix S5. You've got custom 1, 2 and 3, and you can even take that a step further and do custom 3 A, B and C, I think. So you've got loads of custom modes available for video in this camera, and that, like, most cameras should be doing that now, to be fair. And that just means it's nice and quick to get set up and change the different modes if you want to go slow motion or normal or different aspect ratios, for example. And you've also got a dedicated slow and quick mode to record up to 120 frames per second in 1080 though. And that brings me on to my next point. Both of these cameras only do 120 frames per second in 1080, so it's a draw on that point. Let's address the elephant in the room. Straight away, autofocus, point goes to Canon, massive point to Canon. They've just had the best autofocus, as we all know, for a long time, so it's no surprise that it beats the Lumix over that. Having said that, now that I've used it a little bit more, I've found the best settings for autofocus that work for me. Now, it's not perfect still, but it's usable. It's completely usable. I'm going to do kind of like a how to set up this camera, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to get notified, because that will be coming soon. So if you want to get the most out of your camera, that'll be worth watching. When I first started using the autofocus and I was vlogging and I was walking along and holding the camera, I mean, you know, it's obvious that it's not going to be perfectly in focus. I mean, the Canon will do it, but people don't really want to watch you while you're walking. It's distracting and it's wobbling about all over the place. So I don't need it to do that. Going forward, I'm going to be vlogging and making sure I'm stood still, or the camera is on a tripod or something, and it's going to track me a lot better. All it is it's just slower to focus on your face. So if I move back and forth, it's just slower to catch up. That's all. But it will get you. It does track you really well. But what I have found that really helps is if you go no lower than f2.8, it's a lot better. If you go like 1.8, for example, it's gonna have a little bit of a harder time, but not massively. Speaking of vlogging, this little thing is an absolute pleasure to take out with you because it weighs barely anything. Because of the cost, it's a lot more affordable. You're not worried about smashing this sort of money up. This lens, for example, costs more than that camera and a lens in total. So I feel a lot better going out with this than I do the R6. It's just so heavy, and look how big that is. Plus, with a microphone on top and a Gorilla Pod, it's very cumbersome. It's not very inconspicuous. I much prefer vlogging with this camera. Stabilisation, you're probably aware Lumix has got the best in the game. Whilst I was doing my tests, that is so clear. It's so good. Such a really natural stabilisation. The Canon, you know, like people have moaned that it's got that warp in the edges, but I just turn off the digital stabilisation and just use the lens stabilisation, and that gets rid of that a lot. However, like if you're walking along, for example, and you're trying to get a steady handheld shot and you turn the stabilisation on, the Lumix is a lot smoother, it's a lot more natural. Yes, you're still going to get shake because it's, you know, you're holding a camera. You're never going to get a smooth shot, but you don't, if you need that, you'll get a gimbal or a steady cam or glide cam or something like that. With the Canon, you get this horrible sort of like, it's like a shake that you get on the it's like the edges stay smooth, but then the subject in the middle just wobbles. It's really strange, and you can see that more when I mounted the camera to the car bonnet. In the Canon, it's just like fuzzy, buzzing around all over the place, whereas the Lumix is just so good, especially with the different modes that you have on this, and you can literally hold it like that and it looks like you're on a tripod. It's so smooth and it's really natural. So the R6 is a full frame camera. However, if you are in 4K mode, it's got a slight crop. You wouldn't notice unless you switched from the R6 to the R5 with the same lens. Then you can kind of tell, but it's not much. It's never put me off at all. But if you want that full frame view, the S5 has got that, and you can see when you've got 35mm on, for example, with this, you've got a tiny little bit more field of view. This is proper full frame, and you're also gonna get that slightly more depth of field, so your blurry backgrounds are gonna be slightly more blurry, if that's something you're really bothered about. I mean, you can only really tell these minor differences when you're putting them side by side, so it doesn't bother me. I've loved using the R6 anyway, so I've never once thought, oh, I need that extra. But if you're gonna buy one and you're not sure which one, then that might be worth considering. So when we're talking about low light and noise or grain, the R6 is incredible. I compared it to the C70 actually, and I just preferred the image in low light that was coming out of the R6. And it was just great. You don't have to do anything. It's got noise reduction built in, I believe. I think that's what's going on. Never had any problems shooting in low light. I know they say Sony is the king, but it does a great job. The S5, equally good. It's got a noise reduction setting on there, so you can change it if you want, but what I noticed was it doesn't get rid of the noise. It kind of just makes the noise bigger and smooths it out slightly. You might not be able to tell, again, because of the YouTube compression. Once you've color graded it and you've added your contrast, you can't tell. If you expose it properly, I usually expose it by about 1 stop. I've found that that's my sweet spot, I think. Between sort of perfect exposure on the meter and 1 stop, that's where I'm getting the best out of my dynamic range. So obviously I'm a huge fan of the Canon RF lenses. I think they're incredible. When you're filming towards the sun or the light source, it retains your contrast and your saturation and your colours really well. That's something I love about these lenses, and you know, not to mention how good they look for photos and everything like that. However, they're really expensive, so you know, if I'm going out vlogging with a lens that costs a lot, I'm not going to say because mum might be watching, it doesn't fill you with the most confidence. If I drop it because I'm being silly or moving quick, then you know, that's a lot of money that I need to replace. I don't mind having affordable lenses for vlogging. These lenses are absolutely great, really well priced, and they look fantastic, to the point where I prefer the bokeh on the Lumix lenses. On the Canon, they look more like rings. You can see there's a brighter edge, whereas on the Lumix lenses, that's a bit more subtle. So it's got a smoother bokeh in my opinion. You might point out something else that looks better on the RF lenses, but I think they look great for the price. The best thing about them is the whole lineup. Hang on. So I've got some here that I'm going to test out. I've not had a chance to do yet, but the whole lineup, 35mm, 50mm, I've got the 24mm, 85mm, and then the 20-60. As you can see, they're all a very similar size and weight, and that's great when you're setting up a gimbal or you're going handheld and you've got a follow focus on there, for example. And then you don't have to keep rebalancing your gimbal. They're also all 67mm thread adapter, so you only have to buy one filter for them. I love when everything's a set and it all matches. The Canons, you can buy a different lens and they've all got a different size filter thread, so you have to get the step-up rings and it's just so annoying, it's a mess. So I want to talk about the ease of use with both of these cameras. I mean, the Canons are great. I'm used to Canons, I've had one since day one, and the menu systems are really intuitive. It's like having an Apple phone. Really easy to get used to for anybody that's a beginner. The terminology that they use in the menus is simple to get started. Very photocentric, I will say, but I've kind of only realised that since using these Panasonic cameras. When I first used one of these and was looking through the menus, I didn't know what anything meant because there was so much to learn. But after having used it for a couple of weeks, it's really simple and you can navigate around really easily. If you're not sure where anything is, you can create your own menus, so it's really not an issue. Again, everything is much more video centric on this camera and I just prefer using it. I never realised how, I mean, since I've been using cinema cameras like the FX6, the C70 and stuff like that, having those extra features helps a lot. So having a camera that's got those features built in, for example, you can set the shutter angle instead of the shutter speed, which is definitely more photography centered. So just little things like that. When it comes to price, the S5 is a lot more affordable than the R6. You're getting a lot more for your money as well. You're getting a 6K sensor for a start, full frame 4K. what more can I say? It's just a better camera all round, really. It's got everything going for it, as you can see from this video so far. I mean, I know like the S5 has won on pretty much every single category apart from autofocus. So why would you buy the R6 over the S5? Well, if you are, I mean, even if you are a photographer, the S5 is still a great camera, there's no problem with that. But the autofocus on this, if you need it, is gonna be a lot better. The grip, the way the camera feels is definitely much more of a photographer kind of feeling camera. It just feels really good to hold in that respect. But when it comes to this, if you want to rig it out like a cinema camera, put a cage on it, all the accessories, and make it out like that. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to use. The R6 is an amazing camera and I love it. So you're probably wondering what's happening then. Which one am I going to choose? Which one am I hanging on to? Which one am I selling? And it's probably obvious by now. But I've got to give you the conclusion. I've gone with the S5. I've actually bought one and I'm so excited. It's what I'm using right now to film this video on. That's why I can show you both of these. So the main reason why I went for another S5 is because I often need two cameras, for example, like this, where I'm showing what's happening. I'm showing you how to do something with the camera, so I need another camera. And yes, I already had the R6, but when you've got two angles, you need to color match, and sometimes you just can't get it exactly, and it's a lot of messing around. So having two cameras the same is going to make my workflow a lot easier. Yeah, and if you're using one camera and then you switch to another one, it's just good to have the same menu functions, the same features, and know where everything is exactly, rather than switching from one system to another and trying to get used to that. It's just a lot quicker to have two of the same thing and keep it consistent. And also I can have one set up on the gimbal and then another one handheld or on a tripod, and just keep the two systems ready to go, rather than constantly having to swap that camera out when I need it. If you want to stay up to date with what's happening with this camera, and if you want to know more about it, how I'm getting on, some more examples, how to use it, how to set it up and all that stuff, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. What do you think? Which is your favourite? Let me know in the comments below. Anything you want to ask, leave a comment and I'll get back to you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.